Welcome back. Omicron is impacting holiday plans as Canadians seem to worry about the spread of this new COVID-19 variant while trying not to miss family gatherings for a second year in a row. A recent poll by the Angus Reid Institute has found more of us are worried about catching COVID this month than we were last month.
Still, 80% of Canadians say they plan to have dinner with their family this year. That's a 22-point increase from last year. To discuss this latest polling, we welcome back to CP24 tonight the president of the Angus Reid Institute, Shachi Kurl, and you've been polling throughout this pandemic. What is your takeaway from the recent numbers here, Shachi?
Well, thank you. So one of the things that we are seeing now is an uptick in that level of concern at a time really when I think without the announcement and the knowledge that there is a new variant out there in the world, Canadians actually would have been starting to exhale and relax a little bit. With Delta, which was really the dominant variant over the last several months, really the story of 2021 was Delta. We've now seen our populations largely vaccinated, the number of double vaccinated Canadians upwards of 70%. And now that last cohort of the unvaccinated, those 5 to 11-year-olds, the little ones, the grandchildren, the ones for whom Christmas is really all about, are also in the process of being vaccinated. So if anything, this would have been a time primarily where we would have seen what has been a very long trend line continuing to tick down in terms of personal concern. Instead, it's starting to swing up the other way because there are so many unanswered questions at this stage as scientists do their work and try to figure it out around what Omicron means in terms of vaccination status and people's personal health.
So there are still a ton of questions, a lot of uncertainty, as you mentioned. But despite that, as Rashmi had noted, 80% of Canadians say they're still planning on having some family dinners over the holidays. Shachi, I wonder if we have any info or data on whether people are vetting those family and friends to see whether they're vaccinated.
There's very much a dividing line, Chanel. And so how many of us have been in family gatherings or social gatherings where someone comes in the door and says, right, everyone's vaccinated, correct? Nod our heads, and it's like, okay, good. So I think the social awkwardness around asking those questions, or whether, amongst your friends and family, you generally know who's willing to say they've been vaccinated or have been posting selfies of themselves being vaccinated. So, people who are close to those who they plan to spend holiday time with are likely to have some understanding of vaccination status or maybe having those conversations. But that's the key. 2/3 of Canadians, it's a significant number, and that's the key number on this issue, say that if they are having a family dinner or a get-together this season over the holidays to have a little bit of cheer, they're only going to be doing it with friends, loved ones, and relatives who have been vaccinated. And so this is very much a story, perhaps, of unvaccinated folks staying home or missing out on some invitations.
Because the older population is the most concerned about getting sick from COVID-19, right? In your polling, it also showed that family dinner seemed to be the bigger priority outside of seeing friends or even going to church for Christmas.
It has been such a long pandemic, as we all know, rolling up on 2 years. There are some big changes and differences in the way people are planning to spend the season this year as opposed to last year, but we're nowhere close to what pre-pandemic normals were like. So the notion of a big office party, or the notion of seeing your friends or maybe people you don't know, so strangers, acquaintances, the idea of all celebrating at New Year's, these are things that are still not exactly on the table. But for so many families, the anguish and the pain of maybe not being able to go home to see your parents, your grandparents, or other loved ones in another part of the country, that's starting to alleviate. And there are plans for people to spend time this season close to loved ones in more controlled situations, those uncontrolled situations where you really don't know what you're dealing with in terms of who's in the room. That's still what people are continuing to perhaps shy away from. Church is an interesting one because we know, for example, and I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but many folks who are unvaccinated are in certain religious communities. And so perhaps going to church or being worried about, being asked to see a vaccine passport at the door, which some congregations have said they won't do, may be a reason people are tending to shy away.
Shachi, I want to ask you about vaccinations specifically for children. This is, of course, the first holiday season during the pandemic where almost everyone now has the option to get a vaccine. And according to your data, the opinions of people surveyed seems to be unchanged on getting kids vaccinated from October till now.
So we spoke to a really specific cohort of parents of small kids, and we've been tracking those folks since the fall, when Health Canada and the powers that be said yes, it is okay to vaccinate the little ones. We've been talking to parents on an ongoing basis, saying, "Look, how do you feel about vaccinating your children?" And so the good news is the number of parents who say they want to have their children vaccinated as soon as possible was about half, 51%. There was still a significant number who said, "I will get it done. I just want to hold a little bit, wait a little bit." Those are the numbers that are unchanged. But I suspect as time goes by, because this is the same pattern and trend we saw early this year, those who said, "I want to hold back, I want to wait," as their friends, their neighbors, other in their parent cohorts start to have their children vaccinated, the desire to have your own children vaccinated tends to increase, because people are very seeing is believing. If they notice that nieces and nephews who have been vaccinated haven't had any adverse side effects and seem okay, they're more likely to take that decision on behalf of their own children as well. So let's continue to watch this trend line and see what happens. But for the most part, we aren't seeing a lot of movement, but I think that's early days. We're going to keep watching it.
I have to ask you, Shachi, it's the second year that you're polling through the holiday season with COVID-19. Not a lot of people thought we'd be at this point this time last year. Has anything surprised you so far from the polling?
Oh gosh, that's such an excellent question. We always try to go into these situations with a blank slate and an open mind so that we're not surprised. But I think the number of people who are just, I wouldn't say it's surprising, but I think it's really stood out for me, just the level of fatigue. People are now trying to skate a line or walk a line where they want to feel hopeful about the coming months, but in other ways are feeling right back to square one around a lot of what's happened. I think I'll leave you with this one point. The level of caution that we see from Canadians is pretty remarkable. We are a population relative to many other countries in the world that has rolled up their collective sleeves, been vaccinated, been double vaxxed. Many Canadians already have that third booster shot. And yet that level of concern or that level of caution that is being expressed consistently, despite these really high vaccination levels, means that, I guess in a good way, it's very vigilant. People are staying careful. But I do wonder about the impact on mental health. I do wonder about the impact on fatigue. If we've been a country that's just been in this heightened state of for so long, when do we exhale? And of course, we're not going to exhale as long as we don't have answers on Omicron.
Yeah, still waiting for those answers. For sure, can relate to that sense of anxiety. Shachi, thanks so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks to both of you. Thanks for having me.